Okay, so for this piece, what we're going to take a look at is an artwork analysis sheet, because the piece of the primary source that we're going to be looking at is, in fact, a piece of art. And so these are all of the questions that we're going to take a look at. We're going to dive into as we go through our artwork analysis sheet in our effort to go ahead and take a look. And this is our artwork that we're looking at. So it's Miners in the Sierras by Charles Naw and Frederick August Wentworth. It was painted in 1851, 1852. It was an oil on canvas. That gives you the size of it. And it's housed at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. So the first question we see is, what do you see? What details are in the foreground, background? Those are conversations you're going to want to have with your students about what it means for an object to be in the foreground, or what it means for an object to be in the background. Your artistic students may already have that knowledge, but your less artistically inclined students may not, and they may need that help. And so hopefully your students will notice that there's a cabin in the background. They'll notice that there are miners or people working in the foreground, that there seems to be some type of contraption up here in the foreground. And they'll get into conversations around that. Hopefully they'll notice the terrain, that it's a relatively rocky and hilly and mountainy. And maybe they'll notice the river, the winding river, and things of that nature. It certainly looks like the miners are utilizing shovels and pickaxes, and it looks like one of them is drinking something or holding something up to his mouth. Hopefully they'll be able to come to those kind of consensus, and we'll see the very rocky terrain. The next question that we're going to take a look at is, what is the main object of the artwork? Is it people, objects, and landscape? And in this particular instance, you may get different answers from your students, and that's okay, as long as what we want them to be able to do is to justify the answers that they're providing. So, I mean, the large majority of this oil on canvas is of a landscape, and argue that the main objective or the main subject is landscape. You could also argue that in the foreground are the four people who are struggling to mine in the Sierra, and the title of it says Miners in the Sierras. So if the first word is about miners, and we see that in the foreground that we're centered in on the miners and the hard work that they're doing, that it very well may be about that. I would say we could talk about the different objects that are in the artwork. You could talk about the mining materials that are there, the pickaxe, the shovels, the actual mining for the separating of the stones for the panning operation. It could be, if they want to discuss that, you want to encourage them to have that conversation and encourage those conversations. So that way we get more robust conversations around our art and our history, social science in general. So we describe the artwork. What colors and shapes do we see? What is the texture? And so the texture might be that it's an oil on canvas. The texture could be, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What are we talking about? Artistic texture here? Are we talking about whether it looks rough, whether it looks ragged, whether it looks well preserved? Those are all different ways of interpreting this idea about texture. And then the texture of the composition within art as well. And so I would encourage all of those kinds of conversations and dialogues to take place, because I think that it provides for more robust opportunity and more robust conversations with your students. In the same way, we talk about the different colors. You can talk about the grays, the greens, the browns. You can talk about the miners, that they're wearing red, kind of brings them out into a prominent station. You can talk about the shapes of the mountains and how they're located lower down into the mountains or into the cavern in terms of the work that they're doing. So hopefully those are things that your students are going to call out to you and talk about to you, and they might notice that there's a lack of leaves on the trees, or that the trees are more full over here. That might be a conversation that you can get into. You can see some dirt and some grass. So yeah, hopefully those are all things that your students start to point out. And as they don't point them out, or they seem to be missing, you can call attention to them. Well, what about the miners? What are they doing? Or what about the rocks? Like, is there a lot of rocks? Is there a little bit of rocks? How do the rocks look in the foreground as opposed to the background? Does that matter? And your students may say that it does, and they may say that it doesn't. And again, we're looking for justification. You're looking for kids to be digging deep into this content. What do you think is happening in terms of this artwork? So hopefully they'll draw attention to the fact that the miners are mining the land. and hopefully they'll have some background because it's 1851, so we know that the gold rush is in full swing. So we can hopefully they'll recognize the mining apparatus or the gold panning apparatus, so that they can see that this is a full scale that these guys are really hoping to strike the motherlode. And then you can get into a conversation around what motherlode looks like as well, or what that means. And so hopefully they get into that, and they get into you can get into the hardness of the work that they're doing. It's showing how hard it is to mine gold, because you got 4 guys down here in the valley, and they're working extremely hard. You can tell by the shovels and the work that they're putting in forward, and how hard it was for them to come down into this area and to get set up so that they could do this mining. So those are all things that we hope that our students wind up considering. Does this artwork remind you of a place you've been or people you've met? And maybe it does. Maybe your students have been up to the Sierras. Maybe they haven't. Maybe they've been hiking into a mountain trail that's nearby to their local community. And maybe they've never had that experience, at various farms and things like that. And tourist traps, I'll call them. They have little opportunities for kids to go mining for gold. I know, because I have a 6-year-old and he loves to do that. You give them $5 and they get a bunch of dirt, and they sift it in, and they can sift it all out, and they're like, "Ooh, shiny rocks and fossils and things like that." That gives them a sense of what that experience is, or the excitement and wonder that comes with it. And if they've ever done it, I know Calico Ghost Town offers the opportunity to do that, but you can take those screens and you can do that real work normally, and you can take them out and into the community to do that work, or encourage or build a screen at home and have them do that. And it becomes a lot less exciting when there's not as much cool things to see. And they can see that this could become backbreaking labor without the added excitement of rare gems that they know that they're going to wind up getting, but that doesn't really happen in the real world. So what questions would you like to ask the artists? And hopefully we can field some questions from our students. And if not, maybe we can help to generate some of those questions. Like, what is that guy drinking? Why is he drinking? Why are 2 of the miners wearing red? What do these guys strike it rich? What happens with that? Why did they choose to paint it the way that they did? Do you think that the miners might live in that cabin over there? Is somebody living in that cabin? How hard was it for these miners? What was that life like? What was it like hauling your painting materials down into there to paint that experience? What was the stories of those 4 men? What was the story of that cabin in the background? What other things did you paint? What other things did you see? Do you think the artwork tells a story? And if so, what is that story? And so hopefully our students recognize that this artwork does tell a story. And what is that story that is being told? And what I hope that we get into is that story an accurate portrayal of what we have come to understand? Or does that story have some bias to it? Is there some biased perspective? And that's okay. Because most of the things that we learn and hear about, they all have bias. And what are those biases? And recognizing those biases helps us as historians to become better equipped and better understanding as to what it is that we're looking at, whose perspective we're getting, and whose perspective we're not getting in terms of this. And so we're hoping that our students will pull out some of the story from this. Hopefully they'll know that this is a story celebrating the hard work and the labor of the miners as they work to pan for gold, or celebrating the California gold rush, or bringing a renewal to that desire and that passion. Because these artists are painting these works of art, A, to make money, and B, to kind of draw out people here. If Charles Naw and Frederick August Wenderwath, had done the work that they had done, or had decided to pan exclusively for gold, we wouldn't have these paintings that we have of the West. But because there was most of the money that was made within the gold rush was made by people who were selling to people who were trying to pan for gold, we know that stimulates the local economy, and we can get into those kinds of conversations. Like, hopefully we can recognize that for our students and talk about that. The money Yes, there was money to be made in the gold, but there was a lot more money to be made in serving the people that were coming out trying to strike it rich and to make it in the gold. And that's where a lot of people wound up making their money in terms of the gold rush. And we can get into those kinds of conversations and how this artwork helps to generate more people to come out by celebrating this frontier style lifestyle and the hard work and the labor that goes into that. That is a great way to use our primary source analysis tool. If you got any questions, we'll be sure to answer those. You can feel free to ask me or to drop them in the chat, and we'll keep going with our presentation. Thank you so much.